So it's not tell me about yourself. The question should be actually rephrased, how can you help me? Tell me about your past and experience that can solve my problem that I'm trying to solve by hiring someone.
But if you ask someone for a job, you will get advice. But if you ask somebody for advice, you might get a job or you might get a referral, right? So you want to be careful. Just to your last point, you want to ask for a referral without asking for a referral.
You do have to identify.
And I'm super
Back, I really wish that.
Hey, I have some sales.
My dad died when I was 3 months. All right, welcome to this episode of the How to Get a Job podcast. Today we have an episode for you. You know how in every single interview you get asked the question, tell me about yourself. It's the most commonly asked question in an interview. And what I've noticed is the most people fumble on this question, and it's so crucial. So to talk about this particular questions and many, many more amazing topics, I have Mukhtar Kadiri with me today. He is a career coach for project leaders. These are people who are in their backgrounds with project or program management, and he's been doing this himself, but now he also coaches people to excel in those careers. Mukhtar, welcome. How are you feeling today? How are you doing today? How is life?
I'm doing all right. I'm feeding off your energy. Like you have a lot of energy, so I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for coming to the podcast. I know we've connected on LinkedIn. We kind of had a couple of conversations, and I'm super excited about the conversation because when we were trying to figure out like, hey, what topic should we bring in the podcast or not, we came across like it's like people struggle with that question, most commonly asked question. So I'll kind of like put it off to you. Why don't you tell us a little bit? Why do you think that question is always asked? And in your experience, what is the best way to answer it?
Yeah, so I think this is the most popular question in an interview. Interview, and it usually comes at the very beginning of an interview. And I think that one of the reasons why it's usually asked is because it's a nice way to sort of segue into the interview, right? So for the interviewer, it's a nice way to sort of warm up. But the thing is that for the interviewee, it can be a very, very stressful question, right? Because how do you condense everything about you into what, 2 minutes, 3 minutes? So for the interviewer, it's a nice way to segue into the interview, but for the interviewee, it can be stressful if you don't handle it well. So how I like to answer this question is that I like to answer this question with a structure, right? And before I get into the structure, I would just mention that coming into the interview, you want to be aware of what are the top 3 pain points of the hiring manager, right? So, for example, I specialize in coaching and teaching project leaders. So, if I'm going in for like a senior project manager role, right? One of the top 3 or the top 3 pain points could be number 1, the hiring manager is looking for someone that can manage really large, complex projects. The second could be the hiring manager is looking for someone that can lead junior project managers. And then the third is that the hiring manager is looking for someone that can manage just really large stakeholders and a lot of stakeholders, basically. So these are my top 3 pain points, right? Now, whatever role you are interviewing for, you want to make sure that you try to understand what the top 3 pain points are. And you can do this by just digesting the job descriptions or speaking to people in the company. So having understood the top 3 pain points, the way I like to answer this question, again, it's in a structure, right? And the 3 buckets that I'm going to use is skills, experience, and the value that I bring to the table. So again, that's your skills, your experience, basically how you've used those skills, and the value that you bring to the table. So an example could be, you say, tell me about yourself, Mukhtar. Well, thank you very much for having me. Whenever I get asked this question, I like to talk about myself in 3 different areas: my skills, my experience, and the value that I bring to the table. Now, when it comes to my skills, it is project management, team leadership, and stakeholder management, right? So when it comes to my experience, basically, how have I used my skills? I've worked in the pharmaceutical industry, the retail industry, and the oil and gas industry. I've also worked at various levels in an organization. So I've been a business analyst, the junior project manager, senior project manager, right? So that's experience. Now, when it comes to the value that I bring to the table, I can manage really large, complex projects. I did manage a $50 million project. The second value that I bring to the table is that I can manage really large teams. I did manage a team of 50 project managers. And then the third value that I bring to the table is I can manage projects with really large numbers of stakeholders. I did manage a project with about 1,000 stakeholders, right? So this is me in a nutshell, my skills, my experience, and the value that I bring to the table. So, just getting out of character a bit, you sort of prevent yourself from rambling by using this structure. And if you notice as well, I was touching on the hiring manager's main pain points, right? There were three main pain points. And then I had three skills that corresponded to the hiring manager's pain point. And of course, when I went to the value that I bring to the table, each value corresponded to each of the pain points of the hiring manager, right? So when you start this way, you're basically, number one, you're speaking exactly to the hiring manager's deep needs, right? And number two, you sort of summarize why you're the best candidate for the role, right? So everything from then on in the interview should sort of serve your pitch, right? The 2-minute pitch that you just done about tell me about yourself. So, I mean, I know I spoke a lot there, but yeah.
No. This is awesome. This is perfect. I love, and this is why I love bringing career coaches to the podcast, is because we all have our own different way of teaching, but it always comes down to the same fundamentals and understanding the reason why the question is even asked, right? And I think like some important things, like I actually have a different framework. It's a 3-step framework, and is present, past, and future. And I'll walk through that in a second, which is similar to your skills. I think is skills, experience, and value. I was taking notes, right? And we can talk about it. And I think the reason why I say that is because you listening to this, all the audience as you're listening to this, you're gonna hear Mukhtar's point of view. You're gonna hear my point of view. You're gonna see there's 80% of it is gonna be the same, very similar, like on how we approach it. There's a little 20% of how our own little flavor, our secret recipe in a sense. And I would just say, I don't care if you use his or you use mine or you use another coach. As long as you have a framework, unless you're following a process, you're not just going out there without no strategy, because that's where you're gonna fail, right? Like when a hiring manager, a recruiter, or anybody that's interviewing just says, tell me about yourself, they don't want to hear your whole 32-year history, 18-year-old history, 21 years of your life. Like they don't want to hear about what happened when you were 7 years old, unless it's relevant to the job that you're applying to, and because it just taught you a lesson, right? It's not that they want to hear your whole life story. And that's where it becomes really important, and understanding, like, okay, well, tell me about yourself. I have 32 years of things that I can tell you. I'm 32, right? Man, I'm 33. Oh my God. Okay, I forget my age. 33 years of after 30, you stop counting. I actually it's more about what is relevant. And I think one thing I want you guys to keep in mind is this. As humans, we're selfish creatures, right? Inherently, we're always thinking about what's in it for me, what's in it for us, right? For the person that's interviewing. And as much as the interviewer wants to make sure you have a good experience, as much as the interviewer wants to hear about your story, in the back of their head, they're saying, how is this person can help me? So it's not tell me about yourself. The question should be actually rephrased, how can you help me? Tell me about your past and experience that can solve my problem that I'm trying to solve by hiring someone. Like, we just want to make it sound nice and say, hey, just tell me about yourself. No, I could care less if you're the captain of your baseball team, unless that leadership experience has allowed you to build some good people skills that then allow you to be a good manager for my team. If not, I don't care about your baseball stories, right? Like, I'm selfish. Because people don't care about you until they realize that you care about them and you can help them. And so I want you to remember that. I also talked a lot. Any thoughts on that?
No. I think that's the right way to position it, right? So when you hear the tell me about yourself question, it's really about tell me about how you can help me. So I think that's a really nice nugget for people to take away, right?
Right, which it goes back to why your framework, I think, is so powerful, because you're sharing your skills, your experience, and your values, your stories within those three frameworks, but those are all things about them. What skills do you possess that can help them, right? What experiences do you possess that you've done in the past that can help them? What value do you have for them? It's all about them. And I think that's that's what I would say, that it's the 80-20 part of what we have in common, is that whether you describe it the way I say, which is present, past, and future, which is where are you presently? So like I work with a lot of students. So I'm a software engineer, senior, graduated in May 2023 at the University of Central Florida. Like present, past is what past experiences. So same thing. I actually talk about like understanding what job you're applying for, what are the top three things they're looking for, and what past experiences do you have that are going to make you good for this job, past, and then finish. So finish with future. How are you going to, what's the future value that you're going to provide for them? So like, in fact, if you think about it, I have present, which is like the only thing that's different between your philosophy and my philosophy, where it's kind of like telling them where they currently are. And I think you're naturally going to do that in your three steps anyways. Like if you're working somewhere, or I used to work at this company, you're kind of like presently talking about where you are in that instance. Your past is where you talk about your skills and your experiences all in that one line. And then your future is very similar to value, but like in another way of calling it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I'm also a very, very big proponent of the rule of three. I think that just
Yeah.
keeping things in just three is such a a very interesting number, right? If you keep things less
Hmm.
than three, it feels like you haven't quite done the topic justice. And if you go beyond three, if you go above three, it feels like you're now overwhelming the listener, right? So three is like that nice sweet spot. So even for other questions beyond tell me about yourself, I really recommend that people just keep things to three. Even if you can think of like five things. For example, they could be like, okay, tell me why you want to work here, right? So you can mention five things, but just keep it to no more than three. It just keeps the interview nice, succinct, and it also ensures that you've done the topic justice.
Yeah. And to add on that, like the rule of three is not just for interviewing. It's kind of how we've been programmed in life. Like if you think about when someone say like, hey, what's your phone number? Right? I say 321-945. And then I'm not going to say my whole phone number now live. I'm not going to say the last four, but if you see it, it's three different segments of numbers, right? And, but it's we're, same thing. Like if you're asking, like if I had to write my social security number, it's in three segments. Like it's always in three segments. So it's how we as humans have learned and programmed ourselves to memorize things and to understand it. I think it's also like if you listen to any really good speech, like Martin Luther King, I have a dream. He says, I have a dream, blah blah. I have a dream. I have a dream. So he says, I have a dream three times. Or JFK, if you listen to his speeches, or Obama, if you listen to his speeches, like it's always the rule of three.
Yeah, yeah, and it's three is everywhere, right? So morning, afternoon,
Yeah.
night, big, bigger, biggest, like so three is just everywhere,
Oh
all
yeah.
around. So I think it's I don't know, yeah, there's something about that number that makes it pervasive. Yeah.
Um, let's talk about how to grow and network very fast. Like, especially if you are like, minority, international student, you don't have a lot of relationships or family or friends in the country that you're at. And you're like, and you hear like, hey, like networking is king. You need to network. And you're like, yeah, that's great for all of you who have family and friends, but I don't. I just got here.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a big one because just like you mentioned, for I've lived and worked in over 20 countries, so I've been an immigrant many times over, right? So yeah, that's the thing. When you come to a new country, you don't have a network, right? But what I like to tell people is that you have a network, but you just need to find them, right? So for
Mm,
example, I was born in Nigeria, but I've lived outside Nigeria for a long time. And right now I live in Canada. So when I first came to Canada, I didn't really know anyone here, right? But there are lots of people here that share my background, right? And when I say people that share your background, it could be along several dimensions. It could be people that are from the same country as me. So there are several Nigerians that have gone through the journey that I'm about to go through. So if you find them, they're more likely to be receptive to you because they see you or they see themselves in you, right? I hope I said that right. Yeah, they see themselves in you,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So that's one. Another dimension is people that went to the same school with you. So I went to Texas Tech University. Shout out to all the Texas Tech people out there. Yeah, so I went to Texas Tech University, and there are people that went to Texas Tech in Canada, right? And it's a bit rare, but if you actually find somebody that went to Texas Tech in Canada, like immediately that's something that you guys are going to bond over. That's something that you both will bond over, right? So that's also another dimension, like the school. Another dimension to connect over is maybe somebody who worked in your previous company, right? So there are people that you might not have coincided, or your time in that company might not have coincided, but just the fact that you work together in the company gives you something common to bond over, right? And other times it could be other traits. For fellow minorities, it could be maybe religion, because sometimes you can go on LinkedIn and you can tell by somebody's name what religion they are, or it could be gender, or what have you, right? So there are all these things, and the beautiful thing about these things that I just mentioned is that when you go on LinkedIn, you can actually find people with these things. Like, so for example, if I go on LinkedIn and I search project manager and Nigeria, both of these in quotation marks, you would see people that are project managers and have some sort of connection to Nigeria. Of course, you can filter it down to the location where you are at. And I kid you not, the last time I did this exercise, I found like about 700 people with that background, right? And the reason why that's there is because many people either went to school in Nigeria, or maybe they have some sort of work experience in Nigeria, so that's on their profile. And a lot of people don't know this about LinkedIn, but the 700 people that are project managers in Canada, they are potential allies. Like, that is my network. If I reach out to them, I'm going to get a really high percentage in terms of people responding back to me, as opposed to me just randomly reaching out to people, right? You can do the same thing for school. You can do the same thing for fellow work alumni. Yeah. So to answer your question, how can you build your network fast? Your network already exists. You just need to get smart about finding them and reaching out to them.
So the philosophy of searching like that on LinkedIn, that search type of status that works on LinkedIn, on all like pretty much any search engine, kind of like LinkedIn or even Google. It's called Boolean search. So if you're wondering how to do those, like if you just Google Boolean, how to create Boolean searches, where you're able to do and of, like you could create searches that give you very really specific solutions. That's it. And but to add to what you're saying, or to even like, I agree 100%. It's like the more in common you have with someone when it comes to networking, the more they're likely to help. And I love the examples you share, both like in the like Nigeria side and also Texas Tech, because like I think a lot about that. It's like, I'm from Colombia. I'm also an immigrant, and I came to the United States. Like, if I'm in Colombia and I'm walking down the streets of Colombia, I'll, everyone's Colombian. That commonality doesn't work in Colombia. That commonality only works when I'm in America, right? And it's like the same thing. Like, I think if you're listening to this, and American college football is really big in the United States, right? And Texas Tech has a good team. They have like an alumni, Patrick Mahomes, right? Came from Texas Tech. If you're in Texas Tech's campus on game day, and you're going to say hi to every single person that has a Texas Tech hat or shirt or some logo, you will say hi to the whole school. But if you see someone at a Starbucks wearing a Texas Tech hat, you have like permission to go say hi. Like, you feel kind of like obligated to go say hi. I don't know what the word is for Texas Tech, but like I went to UCF. If I were to see a UCF person outside of Orlando, right? Because the campus is in Orlando, because I will say hi to everyone. Let's say like I'm going to Montana for a wedding in a couple of weeks. If I see somebody wearing a UCF hat, I would be like, "Go Knights." My wife went to UF, University of Florida. She would say, "Go Gators," right? And it's like every common, like that common, like you have things that that if they were a Gator, if they were a true Gator, they would know what Go Gator is, and they will reply, "Go Gators." And it would be the easiest transition to have coffee or to have a drink, or just like if you see somebody wearing the Nigerian soccer jersey or shirt on, you would automatically be like, if I wanted to strike a conversation, it would be very easy. And to your point, that works beautifully on LinkedIn. And you said pretty much all the good ones, right? Like where you're from, hometown, city, state, school, profession. And I would even say, if you can't find a commonality like the ones that we have shared here, right? Second best thing is admiration. Like, if you're a program manager, a product manager, right? And maybe they're not from Nigeria, maybe they didn't go to your school. You just reaching out to them and say, came across your profile. You have a job that I aspire to have in the next 3 to 5 years. Would just love to connect and learn about your journey and how you got there, because one day I hope to get to where you are. Like, that admiration also works. Not as good as the commonality, but I've always seen it work really good as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. And yeah, it has to be genuine, because a lot of times I get this.
Yeah.
I'm sure you get this. It's like a canned message. You can tell that they've copied and pasted and they've sent that to everyone. Everyone else. So yeah, as long as it's genuine, you've taken some time to just look at the profile, and you're specific with your compliment. I think that would go a long way in terms of increasing your response rate. And I was going to say something else, but I forgot. But yeah, complimenting is a genuine compliment, right? Goes a long way to just bonding with a stranger.
Yeah, you said something like I can't, like, it has to be like a genuine message, and people are like, well, like, Daniel, like, I just don't get a lot of replies, so that's why I copy and paste the message, and I just want to be efficient, and so I always bring it back to, like, when I'm talking with one of my mentees, because they're like, I see their networking message, I'm like, you send the same message, all you did was change the name. You think that's enough? You think that people don't know? And like, yeah, like, I don't think people will realize that this is a copy and paste message. And I go, all right, when was the last time you replied to a junk mail? Like, when was the last time that you replied and said, hi, dear, like, junk mail, please stop messaging me? No, you unsubscribe, right? Like, you don't reply. Why? Because, like, as humans, like, we're really good at, like, returning the favor in a sense. Like, if I get, because I get emails all the time, and some I know it's copy and paste, some are junk mail, and some are like students that tell me their whole life story, and I can tell that it was made just for me. I can tell that they're like, they study my profile. Like, I can tell they've visited my website. That one, I reply with a Loom video. I take 5 minutes, if not more, to, like, really give them advice. But if I only feel like it took you 2 seconds to send that email, I don't give you the respect you back. I just don't reply. And people are the same way. And I think the key is to say, for example, like, you're reaching out to every program manager at Disney. I'm using it as an example. And you're asking a very genetic question that any product manager at Disney can answer. The odds of them replying are very little. It's right. And versus if you ask the question that the person that you're sending to feel like they're the only person that can answer that question. So let me actually break this down and step a little bit back. Like, if a crime is committed and 10 people, so, like, let's say there's a robbery, we're walking down the street and this guy steals this old lady's purse, right? And you look around and you see that 10 other people saw the crime happen. What happens is most people will be like, oh, I'm too busy, I'm running late to my meeting, I saw so many other people saw it. One of them will call the police. One of them will help the old lady. Like, right? Because like there's so many people that saw it. Versus if you see the crime, you look around and you're the only one there. You now feel obligated to help the old lady. Like, hey, are you okay? Let's call the police. Like, like, because no one else can help. And that same scenario also applies on the networking side. If your message feels like they're the only one that can reply, people will feel obligated to reply. Because I have never met a successful person that's been to where they are alone. Someone's helped them. Someone opened the door. And they're willing to open the door back. But if the message feels like any product manager can answer that question, they're going to feel like, I have a really busy day. I have 100 plus emails on my inbox. I have to go pick up my son after school. Some other product manager will reply. It's not that they don't care. I just don't think it's a priority.
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. I agree. I said I was going to say something and I forgot, and I think this ties into what you just said. I would add that when you make an ask to a stranger, you want to keep it as low lift as possible, right? So
Yeah.
you want to really phrase it like something that it will be very difficult to say no to. Like, can I have a 10 to 15-minute conversation? Just something like that, as opposed to, you know, maybe a 45-minute conversation, or just, you know, not even stating the ask clearly. So the person has to parse what are you really looking for, but just make the ask very succinct and very, 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 very low lift, so to speak. So like I usually like 15 minutes, you know, can I have 15 minutes of your time? And a lot of people can spare 15 minutes, right?
You know, that's a really good point. And we had a couple other topics that we want to talk about. I think this networking one is really going to be really helpful. So I want to kind of stay here a little bit longer. I found, so I have a process like of going from stranger to a referral, and it's 5-step process. And we're covering a lot of that process here. So kind of want to break this down. I wish it was 3 steps because I think the rule of 3 is perfect. But in this scenario, I'll walk you through. So step number 1 is find commonality. So we've talked about a lot about that right now, right? The more you have in common, the more likely they are to reply. Step number 2, and this is networking to get the interview, not in the interview, right? So for everybody listening, just understand. So this could be used in networking on LinkedIn. Step number 2 is make the first conversation about them, right? And that goes back to people are selfish, right? And make the question I understand it. Like going back to the Disney example, you want to learn what a day or a week in the life of a product manager at Disney does, but don't ask, hey, what is a day as a product manager in Disney does? Because that's super general. Another product manager can answer it. Make it about them, their journey, their specific, find commonality, attach it to them, make it feel like they are the only ones qualified to do that. So like an example could be like, hey, I noticed that you worked at Amazon 2 years before you went to Disney. How was that transition from, working at, Amazon, which was maybe more retail oriented, to seeing now that I see that you're working more on the apps at Disney because you did your research? That type of specification and making it about them is going to increase your reply rate. So that's going to increase your reply rate. So that step 2, make it about them. Step number 3 is opening the feedback loop. So this is where you start making the conversation from about them to about you. At the end of the first conversation, what you want to do is ask for a small piece of advice that would take them less than 30 seconds to give you, but it takes you at least 30 minutes to a couple of hours to execute. When I am asking mentors where I am in my career, in my life now, I ask for book recommendations. So let's say I find a really successful business person that I want to learn from, and let's say that he's very good at marketing. And so I would say, I would make it commonality. I would make it about them. And then I would say, hey, Mukhtar, so great talking to you. What book do you recommend if I am looking to increase my conversion rate on my website, right? As an example. I'm asking you for a book recommendation, a podcast, a course, a certification, right? Something that's very little time from you. Let's say you recommend a book, I go and read it, right? What I am doing now is I am proving to the person that I am networking with, one, that I value them enough to execute their advice, right? Because it's not a lack. People love to help people. They just don't think they don't want to waste their time. They value their time so much. So if I can go back to you, right, and say, hey, Mukhtar, thank you so much for that book. Here's what I learned. Here's how I've executed it. Here's how it's helped my business. Now, if I ask you for 15, 30 minutes of your time, you're a lot more likely to say yes, right? Because you're like, yeah, Daniel's not going to waste my time. So in fact, actually what I do at that point, so what I encourage my clients to do is I ask for some sort of recommendation. What podcast, what trade magazine, what YouTube channel, what certification I should learn based on the type of job that I'm trying to get. Something related to that, right? What book? Then once I give them that, I close the feedback loop by letting them know that I executed their advice and here's how I'm doing it. The 4th step is I ask for a resume review. So going back to the Disney example, I would be like, hey, Mukhtar, after speaking to you and learning about your experience at Disney, I came across a role, product manager, that I think I'll be a good fit for. But I know how competitive Disney is. Before I go ahead and apply, do you mind reviewing my resume? Right? And because I've already asked for advice and executed it, by 90% of the time, they say yes to my mentees. Like, sure, I'll review your resume. Get your feedback, make the changes that you suggested. You know more about Disney than any career coach can tell you, unless they also work at Disney, because every company has every company, every department, every role has a little different criteria or what they're looking for, right? And then I would fix my resume based on your suggestions, send it to you and say, hey, just want to let you know I made the changes. I feel super confident about my resume. Now, before I go ahead and apply, step number 5, how do you ask for the referral without asking for the referral, right? It's like, Mukhtar, thank you so much. Before I go ahead and apply, I know how competitive Disney is. What advice do you have for me to get my application visibility? All I am looking for is the opportunity to interview for this role. And the right reason why that phrase, that flow works so well is because, first, you're not forcing them to give you a referral. And 2, you've already shown them that you're a man of your word or a woman of your word, right? And second, they've already seen your resume and approved it and give them their stamp of approval. So now they're a lot more confident to either refer to you, send you to their manager, send your resume to HR, or if they are the hiring manager, interviewing you. And so that process, we've been doing that process for over 5 years with our clients. And for every 5 people that you message from the company, one of them turns into a conversation. It's what we've seen. As long as they're active on LinkedIn, that's the key.
Yeah. No, I really like that. And with that process, as you progress, you're building credibility and you're buying goodwill. So I really like that. And it just reminded me of something, of a quote I read somewhere. I'm going to butcher the quote, but if you ask someone for a job, you will get advice. But if you ask somebody for advice, you might get a job or you might get a referral, right? So you want to be careful. Just to your last point, you want to ask for a referral without asking for a referral,
Yes. And I think that's where asking for visibility is so good, because like there's some people, like you're gonna, if you've networked enough on LinkedIn, you're gonna realize that there's some people who will literally reply to your first message to be like, hey Daniel, and this is literally, yesterday I had office hours and I saw, hey, like one of my students, I'm just using me as an example, is, hey Daniel, or hey student, let's get to the point. I know what you want. You're looking for a referral. Here's my link. Have a great day. Right? And so I told my mentee to reply. I'm like, hey, I appreciate the link. I would definitely use it, but I genuinely still want to get to know you. Like I still was very, like what I said above, I still meant. So do you mind if I still ask you a couple of questions? And so the guy was like, wait, seriously? And actually led like to a more deeper conversation, because he was so used to people just hitting, he works at like a top tech company. So he was just so used to people hitting him up. And so he was sharing the message and we were talking about it. And he goes like, yeah, like people don't mind like sharing referrals because most companies reward referrals. Like what job seekers don't understand is like, when I worked at PepsiCo, when I refer someone into PepsiCo and they got a job and they stay there for over 90 days, I would make $1,500 bonus. And that's kind of what led me to recruiting, is because I was making so much money from referrals, I was referring over 10 people a year. So I was making like over $10,000 a year just on referral bonuses. It's why like I got into recruiting. I was like, I'll make some extra money. But there's other people on the other spectrum that are super protective about their image, and they're not going to just refer to you because if you go and do really bad, like imagine if I referred you and you went to the interview and cursed out the manager. That's a reflection of the person that referred you. And so you also have people on the other spectrum. So yeah, I think you're right. It's like, if you ask people for advice, that can lead to a job. Because if you ask people for a job, like that leads to advice.
Yeah, true. Yeah, no, 100%. I was just thinking, how you said you had the one person that just said, here's my link. I don't know. It feels like you've sent all your clients to that person too. That's
No, I don't. We
I'm
actually,
teasing.
no. I think it's like the guy it's one of those individuals who creates content on LinkedIn. So like he just drives traffic to his page. And so like I just think he just like had like a standard copy and paste message. And he probably makes a ton of money on referrals. Like he probably like is creating content. Now that I think about this further, like he's probably creating content to generate those inbox messages. Probably has his little sister copying and paste a referral link, and like he's probably making like $50,000 a year doing this, and paying his little sister like $20,000 a year, and like making bank. I don't know. It's a hypothesis. So, but Mukta, I do have a question as we wrap it up. I would love to learn why career coaching for you? Like, your experience is more on the technical side, product, program management side, and now like working with PMs, and now you're like mixing both PM experience and now helping PMs get jobs.
Yeah, I mean, so I've always loved teaching, and even when I was, because I've worked in various industries, and I will, maybe train people on our technology, and I just really enjoyed it, and I think that showed in my work. So I would always be put in positions where I would have to interact with clients, train them, and all of that. So that has sort of stuck with me. So even on the side, like sometimes I would guest lecture at the university, etc. And even at one point in time, I tried to just ignore this, to focus on more technical stuff, as you mentioned. But yeah, it just kept on calling me, right? I guess that's why they call it a call-in. Yeah, so I really, it brings me a great sense of fulfillment, and it's something that I've been told that I'm good at, right? So yeah, I mean, why not? That's sort of why I do it. It gives me great joy. Plus, I have the skills to make a difference in people's careers.
Love it. If you can, as we wrap it up, I know we're kind of over the time here. Tell us a little bit more about kind of like the services that you provide, who's the people that you really work with, and how can they reach out to you if they want to learn more about you and your services?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. So I am a career coach for project leaders, and that includes project coordinators, project managers, program managers, or the leaders of those people that I just mentioned. So that's my focus, and yeah, anything career, it could be landing your next role, or maybe dealing with a challenge in your particular role, or trying to get to the next level. So that's sort of what I focus on, and I'm very active on LinkedIn, right? So you can usually find me on LinkedIn. You can send me a message, connect with me. I try my best to answer questions. But if you don't hear back from me, feel free to send me a reminder, and I will do my best to respond.
Perfect. So I would say we're going to definitely put all those links, your LinkedIn links on our show notes. So anybody want to connect and want to learn more about your services, we can go for there. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoyed it, like, subscribe, and definitely follow Mukhtar on LinkedIn and follow me on LinkedIn. You guys are amazing. Catch you guys in the next episode.